Second or two. Yeah, we are live with David Cay Johnston, and I swear we didn't plan to wear a very similar shirt, but those of you watching on YouTube or wherever will notice that we have a very similar style, a very similar appearance. Good to see you, sir.
Beards and all, but I'm not bald.
Oh, wow.
I'm getting there.
Is a real disparity in our images. Yeah, that's a good point. It's great to see you. Thank you for doing this. I know you're always very busy. I appreciate your time and expertise as always. Haven't seen you since Farm Jam, and it's great to see you.
Yep, that was fun.
Yeah, we had a great time. Everybody loved that. We're still there, some of us in some ways. Lots to talk about. A lot has happened since then. That was early September, which means it was 10 years ago in news time, David.
Yes, that's about right.
Let's work our way backwards and take a look at this government shutdown, what it meant. You've covered these over and over. You've seen them. You know what they do. You know the inner workings of government really well. You obviously understand the politics. Was it worth it? Do you think Democrats caved? Do you think they won anything? What are your hot takes or quick thoughts on the shutdown and how it's ended?
Well, there's an awful lot being posted today that the Democrats caved. I'm not sure that's the way to look at this. So start thinking about it not as 10 Democrats and independents decided to go with the Republicans, which overcomes the filibuster problem. What if Schumer had said, I want all Democrats and the independents who caucus with us to move together? And if you do that, you begin to see this in a little bit different light. There's no way that the Trumpublicans were ever going to vote to extend the tax credits for poor people. They want to take health care away from 17 million Americans. And if you have any doubts about that, look at what Trump did Friday night on Truth Social. He ordered states, particularly Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, who's a Democrat, to stop providing full SNAP benefits by having the state fill in for the delayed federal money. Cruelty is a fundamental feature of the Trump administration, and the Republicans have gone along with this. So if you know they're never going to vote to provide subsidies for the poorest Americans to get health care, which means for a lot of people who were paying either nothing or maybe $200 a month, they're going to get a bill now of $400 or $800, or in one case I've seen $1,400 a month, which means they will go without health care. Then at some point, you want to get what they got, which is the promise of a vote in December on extending the tax credits for Obamacare. It'll be interesting to see if they actually get the vote. And this is an opportunity for the Democrats to thoroughly tag the Republicans with, you are a Sun King of France, Marie Antoinette administration who holds fancy parties right, and withholds food. Let them eat cake.
Both two people whose political analysis I really respect agree with you. They said it differently, but both Josh Marshall and Heather Cox Richardson said, I don't think we should be looking at it as Democrats caving, but see how much progress Democrats have made and leverage they've gained. They looked at it differently. My friend Bill Boyle, who I had on the show too, as well. So I'm really happy to hear that that's your analysis as well.
Yeah, let me just add one other little point to this, and that is when they began cutting flights because the air traffic controllers who weren't being paid weren't showing up for work, that changed the dynamic because people who fly a lot, they have political voice. And you saw a huge shift in upset. This is damaging commerce. This is damaging people who have, in the view of some people, nothing to do with this fight, when I think it involves every one of us. But I think that the move to reduce air flights, when Trump could have said, no, we're going to send military air controllers to civilian airports. And everybody in the news missed that. I was kind of surprised. Why was nobody reporting that in the past, when we've had shortages, we send military air controllers to civilian airports? But that was, from the point of view of the Trumpublicans, a smart move to change the dynamic. And there were some indications that public opinion was beginning to shift away from the Democrats. So they needed, in my view, to act promptly and decisively. And now they have an opportunity. But of course, the Democrats have a long, well-established history of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Well, let's talk about but by the way, I'm just seeing news breaking now that apparently the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, planning to swear in Rep-elect Adelita Grijalva before the government funding vote. That would mean I have to ask you about your thoughts on the discussion on the Epstein files. What is this? Is huge. Like, it's going to happen. What's going to happen, David? Talk to me.
Well, once 218 members, a majority of the House, sign on to onto a discharge petition, the Epstein files are supposed to then begin the procedure of being made public. You can be sure that Donald Trump will do everything he can to delay this, to interfere with it. If and when photos are released that show Donald Trump or video in compromising positions with naked or half-naked underage girls, you know what he's going to say. Fake image, artificial intelligence.
Yep.
Without a doubt. But there's another aspect to this story. I don't understand why it hasn't been developed by my fellow journalists. When the FBI or any law enforcement agency conducts a search of your property and they take things, they're required to either return to you the originals, which they may need to keep for prosecution reasons, or to give you certified copies of the originals. So the Epstein estate should have the photographic and video evidence that Michael Wolff says exists, and that other evidence the young women in particular say exists. Why haven't the Democrats gone to the estate and said, what have you got? And if you don't have it, how about you sue for it and we'll raise money to pay the costs?
I wonder why.
Ultimately, this stuff will come out unless something horrendous happens. I mean, imagine if Pam Bondi decides we're going to just trash all this on the idea that there's no more prosecutable crimes. The statute of limitations is passed. A possibility that she might do.
There are two things about the Epstein files that I think a lot about, and how Trump could be implicated, and they are this holdout of bringing in this congresswoman because of the discharge petition. That's on one hand. On the other hand, and we learned more news about it last night, that he moved Ghislaine Maxwell to a more minimum security prison, and now Jimmy Raskin got letters she was writing her family. She's much happier and more comfortable there. Those 2 points directly look to protect the president. Why would he move her? Why? And why aren't we only talking about that, or at least a lot more? She's the second worst person in the Epstein scandal and saga.
Yeah, I could actually make the case. I think she's worse because she's a woman and she was procuring these girls.
Agreed.
But this was done obviously to try and control her. Now, by the way, Donald Trump would be foolish to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. What would be smart from his point of view would be to give her clemency, to release her from prison. If he pardons her, she no longer has Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination. So she can be called to testify before Congress or before a prosecutor's grand jury. And if she refuses to answer or she lies, she can end up right back in prison. But if she only gets clemency, she can continue to claim Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. And let's never forget that Donald Trump, who's taken the Fifth Amendment more than 500 times in several different cases, at 500 times total, Trump always said anybody who takes the Fifth Amendment is obviously guilty. That's not true as a matter of law or philosophy, but since he said it, it's reasonable to hold him to the standard, oh, he must be guilty of being a child rapist.
It is begging a lot of questions. It's not too, a lot of dots out there that are very well connected. And we also heard Eric Swalwell, I keep thinking about this too, Congressman Eric Swalwell said a couple weeks ago that 35 more Republicans are going to sign on to this. And what it means is, what I'm hearing, and just get your take on this real quick, Trump's not going to be there forever. And you don't want to be holding the bag to protect a pedophile. And I wonder if you think there's any merit to that opinion.
I think that's a real serious problem if you believe we'll get out of this without losing our democracy. I'll also bet that right now, today, one or two or three of the Republicans who signed on to the discharge petition are coming under the most intense pressure to withdraw so that there'll only be 217 members of Congress and the petition fails. We're going to run somebody against you. We're going to ruin your life forever.
Yep.
We have something on your son-in-law, and we're going to go after him, and now your grandchildren will suffer. You can be sure that both normal arm twisting and serious threats of an extortion type are taking place today.
Let me just ask you a couple financial or economic questions. We've talked about the shutdown and obviously the Epstein consequences, that scandal. Just got to ask you real quick. One of the reasons I want to talk to you today, I just wanted to get your reaction live to the idea that has been floated by our commander-in-chief of a 50-year mortgage. Are you familiar? Did you hear that they put this out?
No, I hadn't heard that.
Oh, shoot.
A 50-year mortgage on what?
A home. I'm sorry.
Oh, for home. Oh, so homeowners can afford to buy a house.
Yes, and then pay for the rest of their life.
You know, one of the worst things that's happened to this country is that the 30-year mortgage. You pay far more in interest, even if you have a very low interest rate, than the principal of the house. And if you are a homeowner with a mortgage, you want to do everything you can to pay that thing off as fast as you can. And by the way, 95% of homeowners are not eligible now under Trump's tax law to deduct the interest or the property taxes. So it's just a debt. You know, all you can do is pay $10 a month extra on your mortgage, do it. It will save you a fortune in the long run. But a 50-year mortgage is just another scheme to avoid dealing with the problem. And the real problem is we haven't built enough housing. That's something the federal government could help. The reason we got all that housing built during the boomer generation when I was a little kid was because of federal help. We had GI loans. We had California, this thing called CalVet loans, and we had subsidized mortgages for people. But 50 years just means you're going to be on the hamster wheel forever until you die instead of paying your house off. And for most people in America, the only significant asset they're going to own is their home. So you really want to get that paid off very quickly, just as fast as you can. And so any scheme to say, let's have longer term mortgages it's a scheme to make sure the bankers continue to collect revenue and you continue to be on the hamster wheel until, you're ready to die.
Also suggested giving out $2,000 check. Trump, do you hear about that?
Yes. And Trump wants, of course, his name to be on the check. This at a time when the government is borrowing more than $1 trillion so that the billionaire class and the centimillionaire class can have tax cuts. Yeah, here's a little thing to think about. We're going to spend over $7 trillion this year. The income tax, the individual income tax, only brings in about $2.5 trillion. So where's the rest of that coming from? Well, part of it's borrowing. And part of that borrowing is Social Security. When Social Security comes in, they take every dollar of it and use it to finance tax cuts for the richest Americans, building up the obligation that Congress eventually has to meet to Social Security beneficiaries. And as things stand now, somewhere around 2033 or 2034, people's Social Security benefits are going to be cut by a third, round numbers. There's no reason for this. It's because of two things. When Ronald Reagan changed Social Security and raised everybody's taxes and made people like me pay in advance for our benefits by charging more than the cost, and therefore reduced our ability to save, he said that 90% of wages should be subject to Social Security. Well, only about 80% are. So if we just raised it to the 90% level and had kept it there all these years, Social Security would be fine. But there's another way to think about this. You pay the Medicare tax, 1.45% for most people on every dollar you earn, and your employer puts up 1.45%, so it's 2.9. If you make over, I think it's about $300,000 a year, you pay a higher tax, 2.25% in round numbers. It goes to the top. So we have several hundred people in this country every year who are paid more than $100 million for their labor for a single year. They pay on every dollar. well, let's raise Social Security taxes to cover every single dollar of compensation. And if we did that, we could raise the minimum Social Security benefit, there is no minimum now, to the equivalent of the minimum wage, which is in round numbers $16,000 a year, $15,000 a year. There are lots of people who get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year in Social Security. They could suddenly get about $1,250 a month. Secondly, we wouldn't have to worry about running out of money.
Well, your answers are so obvious. Getting policies like that passed is a lot harder, obviously. And as soon as that we're talking about policy and finance, and you can speak to all these issues as well as anybody in the country, really, I do want to get your take, your general broad take. Now talking about the next thing I want to discuss with you, the elections last week, your broad take on Mamdani and the whole DSA idea, Democratic Socialist. You know, I'm trying to, in my conversations and everything that I post and talk about, I'm trying to move the Overton window, have a different conversation than in using terms like moderate Democrat or progressive or liberal or any of it. I like policy. I like talking about the ideas, and I love arguing about them. I'm not no expert on anything, but when it comes to the policy proposals that Mamdani has made for New York City, that Bernie Sanders has made and offered for the country, and many others, it's not radical to me. It's normal in Europe, and it's kind of like things that FDR suggested in the 1940s, I guess. Right. And so I wish we could talk about it in a way that didn't make it sound like ideas for free buses, which are a capitalist's dream in my mind, because now people have more money to spend and buy your bullshit as well as work longer hours for your bullshit. We could talk about childcare. We could talk about all these other ideas that to me are not radical. Other countries have them, obviously healthcare. How do you talk about, or how do you think we should talk about what it means to be a democratic socialist and these ideas that are being proposed by Mamdani and others?
Well, I'm not big on labels, Pete.
Right.
I want to go back just for a second on one Social Security point, not to lose it. I'm sure some people heard what I said and went, oh, we're going to give $1 million a year check to somebody in Social Security. The higher your income, the less the benefits you get. It's a regressive payout. So we can cut it way down. But if the price is to pay Bill Gates when he's 65, $1 million a year in Social Security benefits, fine, if it helps poor people. So when on Mamdani's positions here, we already have about a half dozen cities that have free buses. Albuquerque is one of them, where one of my sons was an Albuquerque bus driver for a couple of years. So this is not a radical new idea. Many European cities like Amsterdam operate on essentially an honor system. You know, you get on, you're supposed to tap on and off. New Zealand has that, but if you don't, unless there's a monitor there, nothing happens. And if we had free buses, it would probably mean somewhat fewer automobiles, especially if we ever adopted Michael Bloomberg's idea that Manhattan up to 59th or 96th, whichever street you want to pick, couldn't have private cars except for taxis and Ubers.
Right.
Traffic would flow better, commerce would improve. We just had free childcare in New Mexico, one of the poorer but blue states in the country. Now, anybody, regardless of income, can get free childcare, preschool. In Minnesota, they just voted, and I believe they passed, or I'm sorry, it was Colorado, to raise taxes on very wealthy people by a little bit to make sure that every school child gets 2 meals a day at school. And we should be thinking about what makes for a enduring society of healthy people who are not under stress all the time for economic reasons. The debate we're having about college and the cost of college is the totally wrong debate. The debate should be in the 21st century, which is unbelievably more complicated than the 20th century, where scientific knowledge is just exploding all over the world. Even with Trump cutting our investments in science to the bone, the rest of the world is moving ahead. How much education do you need? And if it's only 8th grade, I would say, okay, we make education free, no charge to the parents and the child up to 8th grade. If it's 20 years of education, the same rule should apply. What do you need? And one thing we could change would be college students who don't perform should be treated the way they were in the Vietnam War. I was in college at that time, and the students around me who, were going to college to not be drafted, but they didn't perform and didn't show up for class, they got thrown out. Colleges aren't doing that now, non-performers. They're because they don't want to lose all that tuition, I
Sure.
presume. But so with Mamdani, one of the things Mamdani wants is green groceries and healthy food everywhere in all 5 boroughs of New York City. Well, in Rochester, New York, where I live, 125 years ago, the city fathers treated healthy foods, green groceries, as a public utility. And they spent taxpayer money to make sure that every single residence in the city of Rochester, which was the original boom town, was within walking distance, because people didn't have cars in 1900, within walking distance
Right.
of a green grocer who had healthy food in the middle of winter. So when you do that and you have people not going so often to fast food joints and bodegas, you're going to reduce diabetes, heart disease, excessive, morbidly obese, overweight. That will create a more productive workforce. That was the reasoning of the Rochester City Fathers 125 years ago. And so, let's talk about policies in terms of benefiting people. And let's get away from this crazy notion. I have on my Facebook page right now a collection of Fox News things somebody else put together of people saying with Mamdani's election, well, the rich are all going to leave the city.
Yeah, right.
They've said that every year since the beginning of human life. And it's just not true. Yeah, wealthy people leave and new ones come. Young people come and then they find someone. And once they have children, most of them leave. Great place to be young and single, not so great to raise children. That's New York. It's going to be that way forever. It's an escalator. You get to the top of the escalator, you step off and go to Florida if you want.
By the way, the vast majority of people who identify as DSA or support these affordability policies are overwhelmingly Gen Z millennials. And it would be really helpful for, middle-aged and older congressmen, policymakers, and pundits to have a conversation with some of them. You're a college professor. You also understand policy, economics, and as you just mentioned, the history of economics in this country and plenty of others. These young people can't afford even what I could afford back in the early aughts before the crash, and certainly not what my parents could afford when it comes to, anything. The education, the home, the car, all of it is unaffordable. They're desperate for something else. These ideas are not radical. They're old in many ways, as you just referred. So I just wanted to mention listening to people would be helpful.
Pete, when I was a young man, because college was free in California and I got a little bit of money as technically a war orphan, my dad was a 100% disabled veteran of World War II. I got a college education because it was free. In the state even required that all textbooks, any required, had to be in the library. So I didn't even buy textbooks. I saved money by going to the library and reading the books. If you're my grandsons who are between 20 and 34, you can't afford to buy a house. College tuition at a state college is incredibly expensive, except for a couple of places like New York and New Jersey, where they've set it up so it's almost free or free if you get good grades. You got to get good grades. You can't afford to buy a house. The house I bought when I was 22 years old with my own money as a newspaper reporter for less than $30,000. That would be about $200,000 today, maybe $2.25. It's now listed on Zillow at $3 million. So we've gotten the economics all messed up here. And if you are a Gen Z, what has your life experience been economically? Well, when I was born, there was 9/11. I didn't know about it, but I've heard about it every day of my life. Right. There's all this militarism that grew out of it. Then we had the collapse of the economy because the George Bush administration stopped enforcing banking laws. And if my parents didn't lose their home when I was in grade school, there are kids all around me who I know that happened to them. And then it looks like things are maybe slowly getting better because by some measures, the 2007 to 10 depression was worse than the Great Depression a century earlier.
Yeah, I've heard that analysis.
And then comes COVID. And now Donald Trump. I mean, no wonder you're saying, hey, this capitalism thing doesn't work for me. And politicians need to wake up to that fact.
With the 3 minutes I've got left with you, talk to me about your reporting, your thoughts that you've shared at DC Report on what's happening at the Pentagon in terms of what journalists have access to, their solidarity there, and also these military strikes, these assassinations of, well, we don't know who.
Yeah. So first on that part, Donald Trump is committing murder. A number of retired military lawyers have all said this. I don't know any competent lawyer who understands the Constitution and military law who would view this as anything but murder. Nothing gives the president the right to kill people, and we have very good reason to believe that at least 2 of the boats they blew up, they were just fishermen. I mean, there was somebody who was saying, well, why were they out fishing at night? Because the fish come up to feed at night on the jellyfish and other things on the surface, because then the predators can't get them, that they would see them in the daytime. They swim deep in the dark, and then in the daytime, and they come to the surface. But even so, you interdict suspected traffickers. Trump said, well, we can't do that. We can't do that because the boats are so fast. The Coast Guard cutters can't catch them. There's a perfect example of how stupid Donald is. You don't need to chase them from behind. You have all this surveillance, drones, satellite images. You just position the Coast Guard cutters so they suddenly are running into you, and you fire 50-millimeter cannon off the bow of the boat to tell them to stop. And if they don't, then you shoot them. But you're supposed to interdict, inspect if you find drugs, seize the contraband, and arrest the suspects. And seize the boat, by the way. It's worth money. It is contraband. So this is just murder, plain and simple. And that's why we saw one general retire from the Air Force. It's pretty clear. He didn't say that, but people around him are saying that. And then on the second issue of the Pentagon, where you had to sign a letter basically saying, we will only report the official version of events and not ask pesky questions. That's an easily solvable problem. You saw all these reporters walk out. Even Fox and the Wall Street Journal walked out of the Pentagon. The motto of DC Report, the news service David Crook and I started almost 9 years ago now, is covering what politicians do, not just what they say. We will get better coverage of the Pentagon if those reporters now, no longer in the building, start looking at audits, contracts, litigation, congressional research. We'll get much better coverage of the Pentagon. You do not need to be there for everything. And for the official version of events, it's readily available to us. They put out there what they want you to know. We need to be saying to journalists, you got to act on your own repertorial authority. If all you know how to do is take a bunch of facts and organize them into a story that makes sense to people, and you have no knowledge or appreciation of the underlying structure, the law, the economics, you can't do that. Well, guess what, news organizations? There are plenty of journalists who need work. The fastest disappearing white-collar job in this century in America is journalist. So find people who know how the system works or can learn how it works, can act on their own repertorial authority, and tell them, go dig in the public record for the big stories that are just lying in the open, waiting to be found.
There you go. Great lesson. Great spot to end. David Cay Johnston, a great man. Always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Always like being on with you, Pete. You take care. Bye-bye.
There he goes. David Cay Johnston, everybody. We're wearing the same shirt. It really was wonderful. And God, talking to him is awesome. I always learned so much. Get all of his books. Go buy all of his books. He also wrote books about Trump. He covered him in New York City. Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, covered tax policy for the New York Times, and a friend, definitely a friend of mine. Thanks to everybody who is watching live. Really appreciate it. I am at patreon.com if you want to support my work so I can talk to these amazing people that I have been talking to, some cases for years, and amazing new people that often you suggest. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Can't do it without your support. Would be great to have some new subscribers and members. I'll be hosting a live hangout for everybody who is a paid subscriber. You'll get an email as you do, and there'll be a link. That's tonight at 8 p.m. We usually get 50, 60, 70 people, lots to talk about, and helps build our community, lets you know that you're not alone out here on Earth One, as I call it. And I'm real happy to have seen you today, and I hope to see you tonight. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.